So I am Joe Bryant. Make sure that I'm actually have my video on. Yes, I do. I am the executive director for the Open3D Foundation, who right now our primary project is O3DE. So I have been the executive director since March, and you will see some of that when I go through slides. And I'm like, hey, there's no data for 2023, and that's just because I wasn't here, and so I couldn't get access to some of the data. Um, so with that, let's move forward. Okay, so the first thing is GitHub. So 2024 in review. Now, I don't have it in here. Our GitHub stats did drop a bit. That is because, as everyone's aware, in 2024, it was a really hard year for a lot of companies and a lot of employees of those companies. And that reflects somewhat in our PRs and commits. Still extremely healthy numbers for our number of contributors, all pull requests, our commits, new forks, and new stars. Most open source projects would kill for these numbers, but it is, a bit less than what we had in 2023. However, one of the extremely positive side effects is that the project is no longer outsized towards Amazon. So what we are seeing is a large variety of companies and individuals now contributing. And so it's a fairly even spread. So every month I see who all's contributing, how much they're contributing, et cetera. And it's become a much more even spread across a lot of different companies rather than primarily being just one company. And that's a very healthy and good thing. And we need to make sure that, that keeps continuing forward. So 80% of our work is accomplished during 96 work hours, which means that a lot of the people who are working on O3DE are doing it as a part of an organization. But we do have, our hobbyists and contributors who are working on it just because they're interested, and that shows up as the after 6 p.m. Contributions and the weekend contributions as well. And feel free to ask questions as if anything comes up. Okay, so downloads in 2024. This is our download graph. I'm not sure if everyone can make out the numbers. They're pretty tiny. So this is just the raw data for the number of downloads. And Mike Chang, who is our CI/CD pipeline specialist, he and I are working together to kind of start breaking this data out by type of download. So if they're downloading the offline installer versus the online installer, those kinds of things. So for 2025 in review, we'll have a better breakout of all the different stats. But with this, so a couple of takeaways from this graph. One is this sharp spike starting in September and then just keeps accelerating into December. These are due to two things. One is the release, the 2409 release. And number two is because we introduced the offline installer, which appears to be a very wise choice because easily 50 to 60% of our downloads right now are the offline installer. And that is because in some countries, you cannot, the country blocks access to certain sites and certain binaries for some reason. We don't know why. We just know that there seems to be a pattern here. And but people can access the source code just fine. But with the offline installer, it's just one download, which tends not to be blocked. And then they have everything local and they can just install from there. Very, very popular. Another interesting story. So between 2022 and 2023, we saw zero growth in downloads. Well, it was 2%, but it was basically within the margin of error. Uh, uh, we saw a 2% increase in downloads from 22 to 23. However, from 23 to 2024, we saw a 36% increase in our downloads. So, which is a pretty hefty growth. And I'll talk about, our plans for 2025 in a future slide here. But really happy with the 36% increase. It shows that we are in growth periods now instead of a stagnation period, and we are making progress thanks to people like May, who is our marketing person, and and the efforts for everyone here who's been contributing back, whether it's through filing issues, doing documentation, creating a tutorial, doing a video, or contributing code. It all helps. And then even, blogs in particular help a lot. I know May's going to be happy I mentioned that, but because blogs give us a lot of visibility and it generates a lot of interest. Um, so again, thank you for all the work. It's definitely shown in 2024, again, because we're starting to grow pretty hefty in 2024. So our total number of downloads for 2024 is close to 60,000 for the year. The Windows and Linux are neck and neck. They're within 8% of each other, which is what I would expect because simulations become a big deal for O3DE, and simulation and robotics tend to be Linux-based and not Windows-based. What'll happen is people will download the Windows installer because it's easy. They'll check it out to make sure, okay, yes, this is a serious engine. It's not just smoke and mirrors. Then they'll start installing on their preferred platform, which is Linux, and that's where all the tools for like ROS and stuff like that reside. Okay, so Discord. So this is one of the slides where I did not have 2023 information, so I could not do a comparison between 2023 and 2024. Discord's difficult anyways for metrics. Like I had to go through, they won't do like a full year. So I had to go through like each month in 2024 and manually calculate all of our stats. So we had 910 new users in 2024. What's interesting is that 88% of these new users are new to Discord. So that means people are joining Discord specifically for O3DE, which is good. The primary driver for our new users was the O3.org site, followed by Google. And then there's a large, hefty list of unknown where it just doesn't tell us what's driving traffic to Discord. So 14% of our members communicate regularly on Discord. A lot of either heavy users or contributors tend to be our primary communicators. So this means that they participate regularly in voice or text chat. We want to get this up to at least 15% because that's the Discord benchmark of like a healthy community. But we're really, really close to it. People sent about 72 messages per month. And let's see, 28% of our users are USB based. That means 72% of people are from other countries. However, Discord would not show me those countries because unless you have at least 50 people coming in from a different country, it won't show that country. I don't know why. It says it's for privacy reasons. So 54% of our users have been members for at least 1 year. And then like our new users, our server mute rates are really low, which is awesome. Muting is when someone disables the server's ability to ping them, when there's messages and things like that, or when someone does a @here. And the reason why the mute rates are really low is because we have very strong rules, or very strict rules around pinging people. So you can ping individuals, which is what we tend to do. We do not allow for doing like @here or messaging an entire group ping because that annoys a lot of people, and that's what raises your people muting your servers so that they don't get bothered by that. I am a part of like 30 different servers, and I've actually messaged some of the managers for some of those servers, and it's just because they ping @here all the time. And I'm just like this is really noisy. Can you please limit how often you @here? So our most popular channel is the TAC TSC channel. for voice. It is, and the TSC meeting is our best attended meeting. It has 3 times the amount of attendees as the next SIG meeting does. Which makes sense because that's where TSC is where a lot of general discussion happens, and where people chime in. Is also probably one of our best advertised meetings. But it's awesome, that we have such a high attendance for that. And this is also a message of like, even if you're just curious, feel free to attend the TSC meeting. It's every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific, and it's run by Nick Lawson, who does an awesome job with it. And it's a very, very informative meeting, and it's a good spot to ask technical questions in particular. So we currently have 7,886 members. We have, however, 1,600 of those have been inactive for at least 30 days. And one of the things I'm going to talk to the mods about is if we should go through and do a pass to call anyone who's been active for 6 months. I'm a little wary of doing that just because what I've noticed is around releases, a lot of inactive users come back to check out the release, but we don't want to have 1,000 users just sitting around for years not being active. Okay, so our releases and review. So in 2024, we had one major release, which was the 24.9.0. We had 3-point releases, so 2310.2, .3, and then the 2409.1. We had 33 major features released, which includes a lot of add-on features that were added. We had 68 feature improvements. So these are basically, they're not quite to the level of a new feature, but they improve an existing feature. And it's not just a bug fix. We had hundreds of bug fixes. I didn't even bother trying to count them all because there's just so many and they're spread out. But it's 400 to 500 bug fixes, which matches with what one of our pillars was for 2024, which was quality over quantity. So it's basically focused on the quality of O3DE, the user experience. So reduce the number of crashes, increase the first-time user experience. Features work as they are intended to work, and over a large quantity of features. And you will see products, not just game engine stuff, where they will focus on quantity of features, and where like a lot of new features will suddenly come in, but those features also will not work, or will have major issues, or the project becomes unstable for users. And having a whole bunch of new features means nothing if no one can use the editor, or if everything crashes every time you try to do anything. So we started, I don't know if Shauna's in here or not, but thanks to Shauna and JT, they have started the documentation, revamping our documentation process, making it simpler, easier to maintain, easier for people to submit documentation. And they have also started evangelizing the need for documentation, and in particular, documentation for people who are new, not just to O3DE, but to game and simulation development in general. Because right now our documentation assumes a lot of knowledge, and we're getting feedback that not everyone has that knowledge. Let's see. We also released all of the Lumberyard starter game assets. So starter game is this gigantic project that really shows off features. It's also a great testing platform for stress testing the engine. So we got that open sourced, and Guame in particular helped me get that through, and has started porting that demo over to O3DE. So, but feel free to check it out. It's up on a GitHub server. I can post the link to the GitHub server. But it's a great way, like if you're new to O3D and just wanting to experiment with stuff, these assets are a great way to be able to do that. A new mobile rendering pipeline was added. which was huge because we have a game company that's actually releasing a game on O3DE, and so that helped them out a lot. There have been 15 rendering features added this in 2024. We had 20 rendering improvements and optimizations that were added. And then OpenXR is now usable for projects. Thank you, Gallup, for that. And then we accomplished 95% of our roadmap goals. As far as I'm aware, the only two things that didn't make it in that we had planned to get in were the particle system and the water rendering, which has been moved to 2025. And I need to reach out to the engineer working on these, or engineers actually working on these to find out the new date. It's supposed to be hopefully by the end of January, but I'll find out. And then lastly, 2409 gained an extremely positive review from Game from Scratch, which was the first. And it really helped solidify that we as a community are on the right track for O3DE. Any questions or comments about this? Okay. Yeah, so noteworthy news from 2024, Game from Scratch review. Carbonated announced that Mad World is going to release, and it's created with O3DE. So the first announcement happened in March at GDC. Then there have been future announcements and updates about their project. I've seen, some of us here have seen the project because we've been helping them, and it looks amazing. And just every month it looks better and better and better. So I think you guys will be happy when you get your hands on it finally. It really shows off what O3D can do for mobile because it's a mobile game. We also, another company, Echo Labs, they now have a Steam page up about Reverb, which is their game coming out made with O3D as well, and that targets PC. And it's a high fidelity project. And again, I think once people see it, you can actually go on the Steam page, just look for Reverb on the Steam page. It's kind of a dark Gothic look, but I think you'll be impressed with the amount of detail, particularly in their environments. We were in the Platinum booth with Robotech AI at ROSCON. That's a very important robotics and simulation event. It's one of the most important ones, actually. And it was held in Odense, Denmark. It was a very successful event. If Steve or Roddy, if you want to chime in on that, because you both were there as well, helping out.
Yeah, I think the positivity around O3DE from the folks that we talked to, even the people that didn't necessarily know about it when we explained like what its diverse characteristics were in comparison to the other options like Gazebo on one end and like Unreal or Omniverse on the other. To me, it seemed to really find a home in that range of spectrums, the people of tools that they needed. And it really seemed that like people were really interested in where it is right now and that could really help solve their problems.
The things that people really liked there were the modularity. It makes it easy to plug into their existing pipelines. The fidelity, so the renderer in particular, a lot of people commented on how that looks so much better than Gazebo. They also commented on, and it's not just a ooh ah, it's very important actually because we're a physically based renderer, which means that we represent reflections and light correctly, which is necessary if you're wanting to simulate high resolution cameras, and which most robots have. They have at least one camera. And then and then the other was we're not hardware vendor locked. So you don't have to use an NVIDIA card. You can use any basically graphics card you want that supports DirectX 12 or Vulkan, and you're good to go. So people really
Another
appreciate it. Go ahead.
another big deal was the native ROS integration.
Yes, that too. Yeah, we're either anywhere from 1.6 to 22 times faster than other engines when utilizing ROS. Then booth at GDC that was well received by attendees. It really helped our visibility there. And I also attended there was a open source games roundtable there, and I attended that. And I did a talk based off of the information from that because there were a lot of questions. And I wanted to help kind of push like, hey, how do we solve some of these problems with open source and gaming? Many companies we're finding are using O3DE, like they'll just come out of the woodwork, and we're very surprised. I found about another one the other day. Even though they aren't advertising, they are. So generally what I'm finding is companies will check out O3DE and use it for a while, like 6 months to a year, sometimes longer. Then once they've said, okay, we're gonna, use O3DE for something, then they'll start talking about it publicly, which makes sense, especially for larger companies. The intensives, there were 6 or 7 intensives that one of our community members created. These are like really very good deep dives into specific O3DE systems. They have proved extremely popular, so I'm hoping we can get more in 2025. We've started, thank you, Naomi, we've started an O3DE.org revamp just to make it easier to find content. Such as documentation, tutorials, samples, and even like the Connect meeting videos as well. So hopefully we'll continue doing that in 2025. And we no means consider that website done. And right now our big hurdle is that when the website was implemented, it was implemented in a very complicated way. So it takes someone who's extremely knowledgeable about the inner workings of the website to make any updates to it. And so Naomi and I, trying to figure out like how can we resolve this without it costing an arm and a leg. And then the Crucible game assets were available made available for free from APMG Marketplace. It's like a terabyte asset. And so this was a huge win. I'm gonna talk to Colin. He's the chair for SIG Platform. It's his marketplace that they're on currently. I'm gonna talk with him about how we can get that evangelized out more, because when I Google search for it, I can't find it. And so that's one of the things I'll work on in 2025. Let's see, any questions before I move on? Okay, so moving on to 2025. I'll let you read. If people can't read it, I'll read it out loud, but I don't want to be, talking about this, how's it talking about it while people are reading it word for word? But it essentially means that we're going to start breaking into film and video. We're going to continue with gaming, robotics, and simulation. You'll notice there's a word missing, which is metaverse, because we feel, talking with the board in particular, that if you are pursuing gaming and simulation and film and video, basically starts inching you along from the metaverse. I am actually fairly involved in some efforts for the metaverse that are happening now. And it's interesting watching people try to make the metaverse happen. And all the issues they run into and the kind of rabbit holes they end up diving into. So I'm avoiding that for now, and we're going to focus on gaming, robotics, simulation, film, and video. If an opportunity to move metaverse along happens, that's great. We'll take advantage of it, but it is not a focus for us for 2025. We also, will be prioritizing tech that improves O3D's viability for content creation and interchange via OpenUSD. OpenUSD in particular is becoming extremely important. In fact, I have a meeting today with a company specifically about USD. And then we also will be expanding our support for industry relevant Linux distributions and increasing. Then this one's going to be in every single year going forward, which is improving the quality of life for users and the ease of installation for users. Like we've tackled a lot of the installation issues as reflected in the game from scratch review, but we still have some issues that we're trying to nail down with the installer versions of O3DE, and we haven't, like, they're much rarer now, but we still haven't nailed. There's like 1% of our users are still running into an issue, and we're trying to get to resolve that. And then we'll continue to improve and iterate on our nascent outreach to APAC, so the Asian Pacific areas like Japan, South Korea, all of those really high tech areas where there's a lot of game companies. We'll be reaching out, and also robotics and simulation. Japan is kind of a center for automotive, and so is South Korea as well. And we will continue to grow our community, ensuring to foster an inviting, inclusive environment. And note, for those of you who are active on Discord, the moderators take this line extremely seriously. And so you'll see that in some of our actions that we've been taking recently, and reminding, users that, hey, this is inclusive, positive, constructive environment. We're very proud of that, and we're going to keep it that way. Okay, so our roadmap, I actually, let me, wait. Okay, so I'll cover the roadmap here in a second, because I'll have to kind of shut down the slide to be able to view it. So some potential goals for 2025, I'm still working these out, is to make documentation much easier to contribute to and update. Primarily JT and Shauna are working on this. And so they'll be asking for volunteers to help. But this is extremely important because documentation, particularly new user documentation, will make or break whether or not people stick with O3DE. We are going to start creating documentation tutorials for inexperienced users. There's already discussions happening about that. I would like for our downloads to increase by 25% over 2024 numbers. At a minimum is what I want for 25%. I'm hoping for something more between, like 35 to 50%. But the goal right now is 25%. Continue focusing on quality over features. Improving the quality of life for people, making sure that the editor is stable. The newest whiz-bang features mean nothing if O3DE crashes constantly. And you will see me, I'll constantly keep having that as a mantra, and you'll hear it in Discord. And that's one of the things I'm going to be challenging all the SIGs on, is like, look, like, spend more time focusing on the quality of O3DE. And then when that's nailed, we really focus on like adding features, and then any new feature that goes in, we should not get it into a release if it is not up to standards. We plan on 2 releases, one in May and one in October. The exact date hasn't been set yet, but those are the months that we plan to release in. And so any other thoughts that people have for 2025, what they thought about 2024, etc. So very open. And then I'll also bring up the roadmap.
JT made some suggestions yesterday regarding a potential voice channel, kind of moving forward in 2025. JT, do you want to speak to that, perhaps? Not to put you on the spot, I apologize.
Is JT here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
It's just so organic conversations that are organized by the community that aren't official, that can just be spontaneous or even serendipitous when something comes up. Some other Discord communities use it effectively. You reminded me that we did have one. I thought we did, but I work in a lot of Discord communities. And if we get the critical mass where people really start to want to have just random voice chats, it's a really good channel to have. But we need the user community to step up and say, hey, let's do this as part of a dynamic of the community. And it's not necessarily something organized by chairs or has any specific structure. It's almost like a pop-up unconference of sorts, just hanging out and discussing things
That's
organically.
all.
Because I think when we get enough users to get into that habit, I think it'll be a real fertile ground for kicking around ideas. It'll make some of these
Yeah.
suggestions of new features. Do you have this feature or that feature? But we still need the community to step up and start using a room like
Right.
that, start using that type
So
of ability.
JT, you and I talk a lot already. So, but let's you and I discuss this. And I'm fine with like creating the new channel and then having you guys drive traffic to it. And I yesterday, when I was scheduling a meeting with someone, I realized that we don't really have many channels that are kind of just can be used for whatever. And so so I think we have two things there. One is let's create a channel that can be used for ad hoc discussions and things like that. And then another channel that's more of a hangout place, for users and contributors, etc. That's not necessarily themed for a particular thing like, simulation or graphics or content, but instead is more where people can just talk about O3DE or whatever. Is that what you're looking for, JT?
Yeah, we had one, but it was underused, like Naomi pointed out in chat.
Yeah.
But I think we're getting a community and a dynamic in the community where I think it'll be helpful and encouraging.
So, and on that note, I'm thinking that we can leverage today's I think to my understanding, anyone can start a conversation on any of the SIG's audio channels. So let's say, for
Yes.
example, somebody starts to talk about something about graphics, and it's becoming more like, oh, it would be better to talk about this live right now. They say, hey, join me in the SIG graphics audio channel, and let's start talking about this. And then similarly, somebody wants to talk about, I don't know, core system memory issues. Hey, let's start conversation in SIG core. Then anyone who wants to chat about one specific, they say, oh, somebody's talking about something graphics right now, then they can jump in. And then it gets even more classified into, okay, I know I'm not gonna waste my time listening about things that I don't care or things that I do care about. So I think that can be done already.
Yeah, that can be. We just need to be clear that people are at liberty to do that. I've actually been doing that and been getting some traction with it by utilizing the UI UX SIG channel.
So
As long as that's our policy and we let people know, that can definitely be part of this, if not one of the
yeah.
main aspects of it. Yeah,
So
because
official.
I do like what you're pointing out though, that it does give you the ability to filter it and say, hey, yeah, look, there's something in graphics. Let's go check it out.
Right. Yeah. Official decisions need to happen in the SIG channels. That is the purpose of the SIG channel. The chairs and co-chairs and maintainers tend to hang out in the SIG channels. And so, any impactful decision should be made there. But I think there is room for like a hangout channel or a discussion channel for people to talk about things in a informal way, because they may I think the big thing with that is there are things that you can talk about that really don't fit into a SIG, or that really aren't like a feature or a bug for O3DE. Maybe people want to talk about like, hey, my experience working on a game jam or stuff like that. And we have a little bit of that. We do have a channel that people tend to talk about that kind of stuff with. But JT, I'll talk with you about having a more generic channel, what your goals are for it. And I mean, I am a fan of, so I consider this a two-way door, which means that we can implement it, and if it doesn't gain traction, no harm done. We can just remove it and continue on. It's zero cost. So I'm more prone to, hey, let's test it and try it out and see if we can make it work.
Sounds good. Glebe had a really good point, though. I'll make sure and put it in the notes. Not that we don't have enough documentation work to do, but in community engagement, making sure that that's an open door. So because he brought up a very good point. That's a good way to have very topical information. And obviously, I saw that same line. Cool. I'll put it in my notes.
Okay. And then another thing that was kind of inadvertently brought up in this discussion, 2 people cannot create and manage all of our documentation. It is literally an impossible task. It's going to take the entire community involved to do that. So my request is, hey, if you have knowledge about a particular feature or you see gaps, please work with JT and Shauna to get those filled. And contribute documentation, and it doesn't have to be perfect documentation. So we'll massage that over time, but just having filling in a gap with correct information is extremely important for us, even if it's not perfectly formatted and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, we can't just lay everything at the feet of Shauna and JT. It's going to take our entire community to help keep our documentation up to date and to fill in the gaps that we have. So for the roadmap, we have a roadmap up for O3DE. It's a work in progress. One of the things that I really want to stress is that roadmaps are living documents. They never end up in the same state as when you started. Things will change. Things will blow up in various industries. There will be opportunities that come up that we didn't see. I mean, 2024 was a good example of that, where we started having film and video people coming out of the woodwork asking about O3DE. So this roadmap will never be set in stone. However, the community has been really good about getting the items that are in the roadmap actually into the engine. So, but I'm just setting that caveat down so that people, don't go, or don't think like, oh, this is exactly everything's gonna go in. Like, no, this is a, think of it as like a best guess of what we think, what the SIGs think they will get in for 2025. And if you look at any roadmap for any game engine existence, particularly Unity's, you will note that things move around and shift a lot. And it's for any really, really large project, that's going to be the case. But with that, there's a lot of work planned, particularly from SIG simulation and SIG graphics audio. I'm not going to go into each and everything in here because people can, if you just go to the o3.org/roadmap, you'll be able to view it from there and browse it. If you have questions about the roadmap, feel free to message me on Discord. I'm happy to answer whatever questions you have. If I don't have an answer, I'm going to forward you to the SIG that's responsible for it, and they'll be able to answer. The big things are for CCM. I've applied for a grant. Don't know if we're going to get it or not. But the goal of that grant is to update our current CCM plugin /gem to support the latest version of CCM, as well as all of the changes in O3DE over the last 2 years, because that gem is out of date. And so I'll keep the community informed of the progress there. A couple of people have already volunteered to work on it. Let's see, we've had the track view maestro bug fixes and gaps. We've already made significant progress there. And actually I need to talk with SIG content to make sure those PRs are getting reviewed. We're looking at Wayland support. There is a contributor who is making really good progress there. I've been seeing a lot of conversation around that. Collaboration with third party for console support. That is, as far as I'm aware, still happening. And I've outreached to a couple of the hardware manufacturers as well. And then we want to improve third-party gems discoverability, and we want to get the Fedora RPM in, thanks to Red Hat. And then create an RFC, yes, to host Debian packages so that distros can add them, which makes it a lot easier for them, because they can just grab it that way instead of having to go to our website, etc. And we're doing, so one of the things we're doing, the big impactful things that we're doing in 2025, and this is mostly due to cost, is we're moving our CI/CD pipeline to GitHub Actions. This will reduce our costs by about 70%. So every time you hit that button for our CI/CD pipeline for automated tests, it costs the foundation, and so we're trying to reduce those costs. We also are investigating reducing our LFS, which is the large file system cost. So that's basically the system we use to store images and assets, things that aren't code, because there is a 1 to 2 gigabyte limit in GitHub and Git in general. And so O3DE blows that away really quickly. And so that's why we use LFS to store those. And then we are going to be looking into a security audit for CI/CD pipeline. Now, there's a reason for this, which is that there are grants, very large grants out there for improving the security, of your CI/CD pipeline and your project. But we haven't done an audit in a while, and so therefore, because we don't have up-to-date information, we can't really apply for the grant. And so that's to help us to be able to do that. This has SIG graphics audio, so actually this should be SIG release here, which is the May 25th release and the October 25th 25 release. But feel free to look through this. This highlighting is backwards, but we know that we're working on fixing it. We're also going to be creating a robotics gems catalog, which thanks to Robotech, just to make it easier for users to find content. Yeah, and then USD, ROS simulation and standardization of ROS simulation interfaces, which actually I need to talk with Robotech about, because I had a meeting yesterday about this particular thing. Adding benchmarks, that kind of stuff. And then the multi-GPU support will finally get into a release. Function constant support will get into a release, pass support, point cloud rendering support, some core functionality around web GPU, which is experimental. And then hopefully the particle editor and water rendering. So
the web GPU experimental stuff won't actually be merged into the development. It's still going to stay as a separate branch.
Right.
I think we think it's a good idea because it's not really usable until you add WebAssembly support.
Once I get back from Florida, let's Hugh and I talk about that plan, because we want it for people to be able to find it and use it. So we can talk about that. I mean, I'm for the plan. It makes sense. It'll actually make some things easier for implementation as well by separating that out. But I just want to make sure that people have that it's nowhere to go, I guess, is the way. So you and I can talk about that.
Yeah, the main reason for that is it's not it brings with it a whole bunch, a whole host of things that we don't really have like elegant solutions. So like just partly because web GPU just doesn't, the driver support is horrible. So you can't do basic stuff. So you have to figure out ways to elegantly disable features based on driver restrictions. And that gets really in that area where your code starts getting a little bit maintenance burden increases quite a fair bit. You see a lot of complexity, and it's just like, well, we can deal with all of that as long as there is a reason for dealing with all of that. If the reason is not there, then why add this extra complexity and maintenance burden and everything else that comes with it? So yeah, that was the main reason.
Yeah, it makes sense. We need a plan though to make sure that discoverability is there. Okay, so that is my presentation. Hopefully it was useful. Hopefully people got out of it. For me, it's a big thank you to all of you here, because 2024 was a great year for O3DE, and it's very obvious, both from data and anecdotally as well, just from people talking, that O3D is becoming more popular. Are we where we need to be? No. We have a long ways to go still. Engines like Godot, et cetera, have a huge leg up because they've been out for 10 years. So therefore they have much higher visibility. But we are on the path towards there. And it's very obvious we made strides in that for 2024. And that's due to all the efforts that everyone, in this Connect and a lot of people who aren't in the Connect meeting made throughout 2024. Okay, any questions?
I have a quick question on trying to keep at least the renderer, minimize bugs into it. And I know it's expensive to do GPU, utilization on the back
Yes.
end.
Yep.
So I have two ideas. One idea is, of course, at least for DX12, there is a software rasterizer. I never tested it, but there is a software rasterizer that could be
Yes.
enable. Another option is to come up with a mechanism to run GPU validation locally and creating like a hash of the result. And then when you submit code, the hash is there and is validated. Oh yeah,
Yep.
this was generated by the system or something like that.
Actually, that has a lot of benefits beyond just graphics. And Mike and I have been talking about that, and that is one of the things we're going to look into for 2025 is having so that people can run the test locally. They get a hash at the end of the test, and then that hash is a validator essentially that, hey, you ran the test and they passed. And then and then when you submit, you include that hash in your submission, and we'll do some automation to make sure that the hash is there and that it's valid. So
One thing I was going to add to that is the DX12 rasterizer has issues. I think I remember running it a few times over the last few years. It runs fine for simple scenes, but the minute you get into the main pipeline, there's TDRs all over the places, and partly because it's a very complex pipeline, and the rasterizer is just not meant to handle complex scenes. So it would be a tough thing to start addressing those TDRs for this. The hash option is good. We've had this is a recurring conversation that's been happening over the last like 4 years. Whatever solution you come up with, if you are asking the developers to create the hash manually, it will most likely either not gonna work or people are just not gonna do it just because it's a hard ask for every developer to run something as part of a PR submission process. If you can automate it, that would be the way to do it, but then you have to do that cheaply.
Either way, my point is like there are some commits where you look at it and say, man, there are so many changes here. Who's truly validating this? And then the only way, like when the reviewers say, okay, this is a dangerous commit, we can kind of block it and say we're going to enable it until you come back with those hashes. So you have like this is big enough that no matter what, it needs to be validated either by you or somebody else. Because there are commits like that break the renderer all the time. And sometimes we only realize it like 2 months later, like, oh man, this used to work. And then you start to go back and back. Oh, it broke 2 months ago. And then, wow.
Maybe if a change pulls in the graphics audio in the reviewer, maybe those get tagged as you need a hash. Then it doesn't impact everybody else.
Right. So this is a good conversation. I don't think it's for Connect. I think it's for SIG graphic audio. The reason why is because I want to give other people a chance to ask the question if they have it. But great conversation. We just should continue it and SIG graphics. So because what I think should happen is SIG graphics will come up with a plan. They'll present that to me. I'll evaluate how much it's going to cost, and then we'll determine if that's the direction we want to go forward or not.
I have a quick question. Since City's here. Somebody asked in general, Empress, and I believe they're in the chat right now, wanted to know about RML UI and HTML5 and CSS UI rendering. Is the web GPU gonna morph into that at all, or can you address what potential there may be for developing that in 2025 or beyond?
No, the web GPU is just the technology is there to let you render 3D scenes in a web browser. That's it. That's literally it. So what you're talking about is like UI rendering tech stack, and that is a separate conversation in terms of like what are all the existing ones, what are the drawbacks with what we currently have, and then maybe you want to move to something else. Yeah, it shouldn't, there's two separate conversations. The web GPU is separate from any sort of UI related conversation. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, and the person who asked a similar question can chime in if they want.
No, it was just a question about if you have to have this type of rendering. So it's not about backend using web GPU or whatever else. It's about more like if you have like user interface for be able to use HTML5 and stuff like that. Right now, I don't actually use it in my own, let's say, game engine game project. I don't use that. It was more like an open-ended question. If anybody else thinks it's a good idea or not, maybe it's not. So it's fine. Right now, the UI editor for me is good enough, but maybe others. I saw a lot of people on Reddit saying that a lot of UI is actually done by using HTML in modern game engines because a lot of developers knows JavaScript, so it makes sense to. And anyway, thank you for your support. Thank you very much.
Yeah, like you can use HTML5, like it has API too, but like what we're talking about, at least with web GPU, is like, hey, you've already built your scene using an editor, using the existing like assets, meshes, textures, and everything. You have it running using DX12. How do I get that running in a browser? Or how do I share that with other users without actually telling them to like, hey, go download this engine, then go download my game here, and then you can play it, as opposed to here's a URL, and you open up the URL and it just pops up in there, and then you can start playing if the necessary hookup is there. Yeah, so that's the problem that the web GPU is trying to solve, is that just easy access to the content that you've developed. And you don't have to redevelop it basically for web. You can just use the exact same thing and then just share it.